Hey friends, fans, and foes. Shannon here. I live in Canada, but originally I am from the United States. And in the United States, all of February, every February, it is Black History Month, which means Americans are asked, I would say maybe obligated, to learn about the history of African Americans and other Black people, Black Americans, in our country. So to celebrate, I am doing a repeat episode this week and next week. It's a two-parter with the amazing Veronica Blair, who is an incredible artist and an incredible Black woman in the United States who has created the Uncle Junior Project, which is chronicling the history of Black performers and their contributions to American circus. And there are a ton of them. It is a live gallery that's on a website. It's super cool. So you go to unclejuniorproject.com. It's uncle and then jrproject.com. And there's a ton of not only interviews, but videos and photos. Basically, like, think about if the Artist Athlete podcast had visuals to it. That's what Veronica has done with the Uncle Junior Project. And it is so cool. It's so amazing. Do yourself a favor, even if you're not from the U.S., maybe you want to learn about African Americans in U.S. circus. Veronica makes it super accessible, super fun. And here's her story. Enjoy. Okay, bye. You're listening to The Artist Athlete, episode 19, You Sly Minx. This podcast is dedicated to CIRCUS. It's a place for professionals in the industry to share their stories, viewpoints, and information, and a place for outsiders to learn all the possibilities that this amazing art form has to offer. Hey friends, fans, and enemies, I'm Shannon McKenna, and I'm the host of the Artist Athlete podcast and the founder of theartistathlete.com. This podcast exists because of contributions from listeners like you. And saying that always makes me feel like I'm on NPR, which is very exciting because as a child, I really wanted to be Terry Gross. But unlike public radio, at the time of this recording, I don't have the infrastructure to have pledge drives or to be eligible for huge grants. I'm just one woman with a microphone. I need help from people who value this podcast. People who are inspired or moved or just doggone entertained by hearing some of the stories of us crazy circus folk. People like you, because you're listening to this. So, if you haven't already, go to www.patreon.com/theartistathlete and subscribe. Patreon gives monthly donations to creators like me to produce things like this podcast. You can give as little as $1, but if you pledge at the level of $5 or above, you have early access to episodes and goodies. Who doesn't love goodies? I'm working with a graphic designer on cool Artist Athlete swag, and I have a bunch of guests coming up in the next few weeks who are offering special discounts to my Patreons. I can't get into any more detail than that yet, but I promise it is stuff you do not want to miss. So, head to www.patreon.com/theartistathlete and become a Patreon right this minute. I'll wait. My guest today is aerialist Veronica Blair. Veronica started her acrobatic career at the age of 14 with Make a Circus, a community-based youth circus troupe. She then studied Chinese acrobatics under Master Lu Yi at the San Francisco Youth Circus. She began her career at the age of 17, which at the time made her one of the youngest professional African-American trapeze artists in the U.S. She was personally hired by Cedric Walker as a resident aerialist for Universal Circus. During her 5 years with Universal, she had the privilege of working with celebrated and prominent artists, including trapeze great Lenormand Fox and the renowned godfather of the tissue, Gerard Fasoli, at the Centre National des Arts du Cirque in Chalon in Champagne, France. Man, I stress out every time I need to say the name of that school. I split this interview into 2 episodes. In this episode, Veronica shares the stories on her career path to becoming a professional aerialist. In next week's episode, Veronica talks about how her experiences launched her into an investigation of the history of people of color in American circus. This ultimately led to her creating an ongoing work called the Uncle Junior Project. If you're a Patreon, you have access to both episodes right now. For my future Patreons, here's part 1 of my interview with Veronica Blair. All right, Miss Veronica Blair.
Awesome.
So tell the people at home who you are, what you do.
Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Blair, and I've been performing and teaching circus arts for about 20 years now. I got my start in San Francisco, California, at the age of 14 when I joined a company called Make a Circus, which is a community-based circus in San Francisco. And just a little background on that, San Francisco has a long tradition of circus in the parks, as we call it. It started with San Francisco Mime Troupe, and then Pickle Family Circus was a big part of San Francisco culture for like many years. And when that company disbanded, Make a Circus was the company that took over and filled that void. So when I was 14, they got a huge grant to have a teen apprentice program, and I auditioned for that program and I got in. The program was super cool. It was 2 days a week after school, and they taught San Francisco youth circus arts for free. And if you completed the program, then you got to participate, you got to perform in the summer show, which paid you $180 a week. So
good.
Yes. I was super excited about that. So that's how I basically got my start in a nutshell. And
what did you do? Was it like those 2 days a week when you guys met? Was it generalist studies? So you do like juggling and acrobatics and all that? Or
it
what
was
did you...
generalist. Very.
Okay,
it
cool.
was like, it was quite a bit because we'd meet for like 2 to 3 hours. So
Nice.
They'd be like maybe a little snack, and then we'd learn clowning. We'd learn how to put on makeup. We'd learn juggling. We'd learn pyramids. We'd learn everything. Acro. Everything was included except for the aerial. So It was like really extensive training by some of like the best clowns and performers at that time.
Nice.
Yeah.
So Make a Circus, $180 a week.
Yes, I was
Touring
balling
California.
out of
No
control at 14. At the time, Circus Center, which we know today, the place that we know as Circus Center today was known as the San Francisco School of Circus Arts. And that school is basically ran by Master Lu Yi, and he was he was brought in to train people for Pickle Family Circus, and then he started to train youth in San Francisco.
And he's trained everyone.
He is trained
like right now.
everyone.
I feel like for the audience who doesn't know, Master Lu Yi has trained like anyone who graduated from ENC in the past, like, is it safe to say 7 years?
Yeah, I would say like 5 to 7
5
years.
to 7 years.
Like Lu Yi has had his hands on them.
Yeah.
Yes.
He's the guy.
Yes. Super giving and compassionate, and he can spot talent from like a mile away.
So he spotted you.
Like he did with me.
Yes.
So he came to a performance of Make a Circus, because that's what you did in San Francisco. You went to circus in the parks, and he saw me perform, and he asked me to meet him in his office. And he said, he calls me by my middle name, which is Blair. But he can't say Blair, so it'd be like Brian.
Keep going with this
Brian. I want to add more color to my troupe. And like that, I was a part of the San Francisco Youth Circus. So I would show up for rehearsal. Not rehearsal.
Were there
practice,
any other
yeah.
people of color? I mean, he's Chinese.
Yeah, he is Chinese. But no, there was 2 older guys that were of African descent.
Okay.
But they were like kind of graduating high school, and they were kind of like, I don't see a future with this. So they had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. But no.
Gotcha.
No. That was an interesting time in my life too, but it didn't matter because I had kind of found something that I felt like I was good at, and that and it was free because Louis didn't ask for any money. And, it was like what set my heart on fire as like a young person. So that's how I became part of the troupe. And I unfortunately only trained with Youth Circus for like a year because it came down to whether I wanted to perform with Make a Circus in the summers, which was a big commitment, or just stay and train with Master Lee and become like an incredible acrobat and then go to ENC like everyone else did. And fortunately, because everything happens for a reason, I chose to stick with Make a Circus.
I think this is such an interesting thing. Like, it's so true though. Yeah. Like, the minute you stop performing, something happens to your training.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I watch this from people, and I've seen this in myself. Like, the minute you get a contract, or the minute that like you're getting paid to do it, you're like, the training. Even if you keep continuing to like go, do your skills, work out, there's something that happens there.
That happens with the training, but what happens is that the performing side of the circus artist's life is a training as well. And it's in my view, like it's not, you can't compare it to just like training at a gym. Training at a gym is a specific type of training. You're training to get skills. You're training to maintain a certain amount of flexibility between contracts. Or if you're a novice, you're like training to get to a certain level. Whereas when you're performing, especially in a big arena where you have so much space to fill and you have so much energy to give out, if you're a good performer, you're doing that. That's a completely different type of training that needs to happen.
Yeah, totally.
So, and you know, he was right. He was like, you need to train every year until you get good, and then you can perform. But I was like, but I'm already performing and I'm making $180. God. So, I did that, and that path led me to where I am today, which is excellent.
Yes. So Make a Circus led to Universal.
Yes, it did. My plan actually was after high school to go to college and get a degree in communications, radio broadcasting, but two things happened. One was I became an aerialist.
Oh, yeah.
Which didn't happen. Keep in mind that I wasn't an aerialist. I was training in Make a Circus, and with Lee, I was training in Chinese acrobatics and juggling and clowning and stuff. And I didn't want to be an aerialist because all the girls were aerialists, and I wanted to be a acrobat. And a dear friend of mine, her name is Sarah Moore, who's an amazing clown who got her start on Ringling. She was directing Make a Circus for that summer season, and she was like, Blair. I don't know why people butcher my name, but she was like, Blair, I need an aerialist, and I think you should be the aerialist. And I didn't get where she was going, but she was like, it's time. And I was like, it's time for what? And I was like, no, I want to do acrobatics, like, not interested in doing trapeze. And then she was like, let me tell you, okay, let me tell you this. Let's meet together, Blair, and we'll have lunch. And and we'll just talk about it, okay? So we had lunch, and she let me get a hamburger, but not just a hamburger from the menu. She let me customize it. She let me get whatever I wanted off the menu. So I got cheese, and I got bacon, and I got avocado, just like everything.
Is that burger place still in SF?
I think it was Crepes on Cole.
Okay.
I think it's
the fateful place.
Yes,
Crepes on Cole.
I think it was that place, because I remember sitting in the window and I was eating this burger, and she was like, blah 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 blah, aerialist, you know, and there's this big show, and I was like, and I was just into that cheeseburger, and she was like, at the end of that, she was like, so what do you say, Blair? And I was like, I really don't want to be an aerialist. I'm an acrobat. And she was like, you have 2 months. I just remember that moment where she looked at me and she was like, I'll give you 2 months. You have 2 months. And I was like, okay. So I just started training.
You have 2 months to become an aerialist.
Yes.
Gotcha. She was like, I bought you that damn burger.
Yeah. She was like, come on. I don't want to hear that.
Okay.
And at the time I couldn't afford aerial classes. So what I would do is I would watch the aerial classes across the gym, and I'd pretend like I was like stretching and stuff like that, and I would watch the classes, and then after the class was over and the gym was cleared, I would get up on the trapeze and I would practice what I saw being practiced in class. And there was another girl there my age, Frida, who's a very, very dear friend of mine that lives in Paris now. She was like, you can't just do that. You can't do that. You have to take a class. And I was like, no, I don't. And I would just continue to like practice what I saw in class. And then she like reluctantly started to teach me. And then we built a friendship that way. And so that's how I learned trapeze. My first apparatus, my first ever performance, I debuted at 17 at Make a Circus as a fairy godmother of Lucy Drooler in this show called Penelope Puddles Problem. Blah, blah, blah. I can't even say it. It's a Penelope Puddles Problematic Playground. So the title is supposed to be a tongue twister.
Hard to say.
Yeah. And
that
I
was
still
successful
can't say it. So I played a fairy godmother in that, and I gave Lucy Drooler some magical clown shoes on my trapeze, and I did this like swinging trapeze act on a dance trapeze. And then after that season was over, yay, I was so happy, but wasn't planning on continuing with circus.
Uh-huh.
I wanted to go to college.
Yeah.
So I went to college for a month. No joke, a month. Moved in and everything, and realized that I needed about $7,000 more a semester to cover everything needed for the school. And I was like, no, I can't. Something deep within me was like, no, this is not it. Went back to San Francisco, took a video from that summer show, sent it into Universal Circus, and I got a call within 2 weeks.
Wow. That's awesome. Cool. Can you tell the people at home about Universal, what it is? It's an amazing circus.
Yes, it is. It is so amazing. It is the country's only African-American owned and operated circus. And they're in their 25th year right now. So they're celebrating their
and
huge
all
anniversary.
of the performers are also people of color.
Yes. Yeah. But when they first got their start, a lot of the acts were African-American or people of African descent.
Okay.
So their focus was that just because of a meeting that the founder Cedric Walker had with a man named Robert Houston, who had an exhibition in New York of African Americans in circus. I don't know how they met, but Cedric stumbled upon this exhibition and it did something to him. So he started to inquire more about African Americans in circus, and he paid a visit to Robert's house in Philadelphia, and Robert Houston, he turned his house into a circus museum, which is open to the public. You have to call and make an appointment. But so Cedric visited the house, and they had this long conversation about African Americans in circus. And at the end of that conversation, Cedric was like, do you think I could do that? Do you think I can pull all these people together? And Robert was like, probably, I could help you. And so that's basically how Universal Circus started 25 years ago. So it's an amazing show. It's one of the few tinted traveling circus shows left in the country at this point. And what it is that it's a hybrid of Cedric's background, which is the music industry and like entertainment, like concerts, lasers, a DJ, multi-million-dollar sound system, and just live, like organic entertainment. And this guy searches the globe for entertainers. When I was performing with Universal Circus, I was performing with people street performers that he found on the street in South Africa, to people like high wire walkers from Colombia. And then there was just like, I was one of the few African Americans in the show at the time, but there was just so much to learn because it's such a hybrid of a show that you have to keep it's almost like Showtime at the Apollo.
Yeah.
Except people aren't booing you.
No. But it has that feel to it. That makes so much sense that he's in music, because it feels like almost a concert.
Yes. The whole opening of the show is always hype. It's always lasers. It's always blinding lights. It's always
so good.
A DJ. It's always, can you feel it? They're like getting you pumped up to see this show. It is super interactive. And as a performer there, I learned a lot. Like, one of the comments about my performances that I often hear is people are like, you have such a presence. How can you just draw people in? It's because I used to work at Universal Circus for 5 years, where if the audience wasn't screaming about something that you were doing on stage, or like standing up and shaking their head, or like dancing, or saying, you go girl, then there's a big problem there.
Wow.
So I feel like Universal Circus was like the ultimate circus boot camp, and I got a lot of great training through Universal Circus, and it really set me up to be the performer that I am today.
And you mentioned the other day they sent you to France.
Yes. Yeah. So I came in as a dance trapeze artist, and you guys have to realize, like, this was like 2000, 2001, and dance trapeze was known in the circus industry, in the circus world, but it was like kind of like a dance studio thing. Like, they didn't really have like trapezes. They had like ropes and like little bars and stuff, and then they
had the wooden dowel bars.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
And then it evolved from that, and I met a woman from Montreal, Shelly, who had like her trapeze, and she put the 2 points together. And then when I went there with that, they had never seen that before. They didn't know why the trapeze was tied together like that. So when I got there and I auditioned, he was like, I like that. That's different. And he ended up sending me to a woman named Lenorma Fox. My coaches are amazing. He sent me to a woman named Lenorma Fox, who was the stunt double for Betty Hutton in The Greatest Show on Earth.
Oh, wow.
And she was really, really famous for swinging by her heels at the time. And she was on ring for many, many years. Circus royalty, Lenorma Fox, and she took the trapeze and had someone weld a spreader so that I could separate my ropes, because it was appalling to her that my 2 ropes were together. And then she made crystal ball like weights for me, and we put glued rhinestones on them.
Yes.
And she took me to the circus flea market, and I got like some rhinestone 2-piece bikinis, and we made feather capes. Between her and like working with Dolly Jacobs a little bit on presentation, they had me looking like a black Barbie doll.
No doubt.
Yeah. So the first bit of training there was extraordinary. I was in Sarasota, Florida. They had totally like pimped out my trapeze. I had all these sassy costumes, and I was getting like walking lessons, how to present my arms lessons from Dolly Jacobs. And so I went on the show for the first year. And then after that, Cedric was like, well, I want a dual tissue act. And this was like 2002 when Draw Leon was out, and like the flying dual silks was hot, and everyone had to have that act. So now we had to do the black version. So he sent me and my partner at the time, Jean-Claude Belmont, who is from France, and who's a really amazing strap artist in his own right. He put us together in a duo, and we went down to Marseille in the south of France, and we trained with this man named Gérard Fasoli, who's the godfather of the silks.
And has been mentioned before on this show.
Yes.
From Fred.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
And, so at the time I didn't know that I was training with a circus innovator, circus royalty. But he was amazing, and he was always challenging us to research and to like create our own things. And I had any prior like experience on the silks, on the tissue before, but he worked with where I was, and I learned how to do, like, the first thing I learned how to do on the silks was a straddle climb. And on like medium stretch, like European style, like tissue, like the real deal. And that was like, I would literally like go home crying. And what we ended up creating, Jean-Claude and I, at the end of the 2 months, was like a hybrid of like flying silks, but we did this amazing, just reversing a candy cane wrap and getting into a catcher's lock and doing some catching.
Nice.
That looked like we were in a tango kind of duet in the air. And so I feel like we created something that was very innovative and very beautiful, in 2 months. And we ended up, that's like kind of one of the acts that I'm the most known for, which is like annoying but not annoying.
Do you have video of it?
At home, at my mom's house, I do have like a VHS of it. I was thinking of like...
Yeah, you have to. No, you have to get it digital somehow.
I know, I need to like do all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I ended up, that act was
I think about that all the time though.
Yeah.
There's so much on VHS. Crazy acts that just like don't get put or uploaded or put onto any kind of like file, and it's like so much work is lost that way.
And I'm going to my father's house like this weekend, and he has the video from when I was training in Circus Sarasota tent with the 2-piece like rhinestone bikini costume and the feather cape and like this guy, like me doing a neck span and all this stuff. So I'm gonna like make him dig that video out. I have to have it. Like, cause I was 18. I'm never going to be 18 again. No. So I just like want to get that video. But, so that was, my first interaction with Gerard, and it was like my first time in France and everything. We ended up performing that act for 2 years. It was so popular. And after the 2 years, I ended up going to South Africa to, not to perform, but to rehearse at Zip Zap Circus School, on a duo swinging trapeze act. There is this
with another girl or
with a guy.
Okay,
with a guy. His name is Wandy, and so in South Africa, this is a little known history fact, but there's this duo called the Ayak brothers from South Africa, and what they did in the 80s was they kind of innovated the swinging trapeze, and they did a late 70s, 80s. They did a swinging act with just foot catching. They just call it foot catching. So that's like catch, like where you catch your feet to the knees and you slide to the ankles and stuff like that. And they did that while swinging. And they had like this whole like thing that they're famous for.
This podcast is brought to you by The Artist Athlete. Did you know that The Artist Athlete is more than just a podcast? It's a growing online resource for students of the aerial arts to deepen their journey to badassery by accessing techniques approved by physical therapists and master coaches in the industry. Our current spotlight is on the fundamentals of aerial alignment, a practical manual for hanging upside down. This online manual is a step-by-step guide. It is complete with photos, videos, and exercises that you can implement immediately to help you gain the strength and awareness you need for an aerial practice that promotes shoulder health and longevity and good posture upright, so you don't walk around like a gorilla. But don't just take my word for it. Here's Circus physical therapist Dr. Jen Crane of Cirque Physio to tell you more.
The fundamentals of aerial alignment is an absolute must-have for every aerialist of every level. I can't even tell you how many shoulder injuries I treat that are a direct result of rushing past the basics in an attempt to get a trick too soon. In the manual, Shannon deconstructs the fundamentals, including the correct muscular engagement to safely arrive in these positions and the rationale for why it matters. Of course, in addition to all of these fabulous pearls of wisdom, the book is also ridiculously fun to read. It's been lovingly garnished with the Shannon humor we all know and love.
Thanks, Jen. Cirque Physio is also featured in the book to give scientific insight into why it all works. Pick up your copy today by going to theartistathlete.com and clicking e-manuals. Listeners of the podcast can get a 10% discount by typing in the offer code PODCAST at checkout. Again, that's theartistathlete.com, offer code PODCAST. Now, back to the show.
And did you get sent to South Africa to do this, or did you elect to do this yourself?
I actually don't remember how it came. That act was so popular. That was an act. The Ayak Brothers was a very popular act on Universal Circus. And I believe that Cedric probably wanted to recreate it, but I don't remember. And I was just down. I was just down to go. So I think I was about 20 going on 21 at the time. So I went to South Africa to learn like this technique. And I met another guy who also did the foot catching act, because in South Africa, they would kind of duplicate and copy each other's act and then go to different parts of the world. And so I went there with my partner, Wandy, who's South African. And then I spent like 4 months there training the technique for that act, which was insane because my body did not have enough time to adjust to doing a duo tissue act. to doing like a high impact, high intensity, like swinging trapeze act where it turned out that I was the catcher because my partner and I were the same size.
Wow.
And it was intense. And so we did a whole still routine, which was pretty like risky and dangerous now that I think about it. And then when it was time
did you have lunges? Were you?
Yeah, we did.
Okay.
We did. But like he had the main, like for the still routine, not really. And then, but that was so risky. That was so scary. But then for the swinging, he had one. And then mine was directly to the trapeze. And after the static routine, we would switch places. And then I'd start pumping the swing. We would pump it together. And then I would do all of the catching and the swinging. And that was our stick. And we actually got scouted by a couple companies in rehearsal because the act was like so different. And then I was like, this is it. This is like gonna be the best act that I ever do in my life. And unfortunately, duo partnerships being as they are, like we made it into the show, but we were having some technical issues. And sometimes like you able to really kind of tell who you're working with when times get a little bit tough. And it just didn't work out that we ended up performing that act together for any long period of time. And so I went back into training as a solo swinging trapeze artist.
No way.
Yeah. That's funny. And there's a video of that act out too. Somewhere. Someone has a video. So you had a
solo swinging act.
I didn't. I just trained it.
Oh.
I just trained it. I went back to Lenormand in Sarasota. They set up a rig in her backyard and a trailer for me. And I just stayed there for like 6 months training.
Oof.
And it was funny because by this time, like I was getting like pretty well known, like in Sarasota and in the circus community, because everyone heard about this black girl on the trapeze. I'm not the first, but I definitely was like the youngest, and people would be like, "Oh, Veronica, the black girl on the trapeze."
What was that like?
Yeah.
What was that like in France?
Oh, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
The second time I went to France was to work on my solo, my first solo tissue act. And I went back to Gerard.
Uh-huh.
And this time it was during the school season. So I went to Connect, the school in Chalon and Champagne. Mm-hmm. And I trained at that school for almost 2 months under Gerard. And then because I was training there anyway and school was in session, I got to participate in all of the workshops and all the classes. So I got to be like a student for 2 months, which was amazing. And at the end of the 2 months, I had to
Connect too.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Not a bad place to be a student.
Not a bad place to be a student. And
I'm sorry, I'm just like so jealous of your life right now. I'm
it
like
was
everything
hard,
like, and I just like, no doubt.
It was super hard,
doubt.
and my body was like, I didn't even know. I was like in constant pain, and I didn't even know.
Yeah.
But I was there, and so I spent two months there working with him one-on-one. Let him, like, I gave him this whole like photo book of Jean-Claude and our act. Duo act. And I got sick and he took care of me. Like I remember all of this stuff. We worked together really closely, did a lot of research as they call it, and really came up with an act that suited me at the time and at my level. And I remember I just learned so much from him. First of all, the man is incredible. He was a gymnast. He was like a high level trampoline artist. Then he started doing aerial, like legit aerial, like single heel hang aerial, like trapeze, like single heel hang aerial. But like, he's just an incredible artist. And he's done incredible work, not only just in his own right as an artist, but he's like coached and has been a nurturer to so many artists. And I learned how to like kind of stop pimping my body out, like pimping myself out, to like do these like high intense level like acts, and to focus on being an artist. I learned how to be an artist. I learned how to find what works well for my body and not just have a coach say, "Wow, Veronica, you're really, really strong. Just do this trick," and have me like hanging in like a side plunge or a back plunges were like came pretty natural, but like side plunges or like single toe hangs or whatever, because I'm strong, like just have me hanging in it. He was like, you're an artist. You're not just like an athlete. And like, thing.
Tying it all in together. Love it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I learned all of that from
Beautiful.
him, and presenting my act to the admin, like to the president of the school, like before I left, was just like really intense for me. But I learned, the feedback that I got from them was just like, it was life-changing. And when I went back to Universal Circus, fortunately but unfortunately, that was my last year. But because I had evolved as an artist and I had emerged after that experience. That's my 5 years at Universal Circus. A bunch of other stuff happened. I did a bunch of other acts, but that's my 5 years at Universal Circus.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And so after Universal, you left to...
Wow. After Universal Circus, I was slated to go to a show called Africa. Uh-huh. And it's a German company.
I think it's still running.
Yeah, they're bringing it back. I actually am looking to possibly go back again.
Nice.
But something happened with that. Some circus drama happened, and I ended up going to massage therapy school and bartending and like...
and being a person.
Yeah, and being a person.
Wow.
For like the first time in 6 years.
What was that like for you? Was that crazy?
It was crazy because by that time, all I had known was the circus and living in hotels and stuff like that. And so I was back in San Francisco. I was back at my mom's house. I knew that I didn't want to teach, but I wasn't well versed in how to keep up with my training for myself because I'd only worked with trainers. And then while I was on the road, I would like work with the Chinese coach from the Chinese troupe on my handstands and my flexibility. And I'd have my Russian coach for ballet and for like oversplits or like whatever. And I had another coach for like training plunges under the bleachers. So
keeping up with stuff when those people weren't around was like...
I was like, well, I didn't know, I wasn't aware of like how much I needed to condition. So that was a learning curve and a learning process as well. It was depressing.
For the mic.
Oh. That was a big learning curve, being a regular civilian for the first time.
I remember like I came back from Australia where I was like in these nice hotels and working like 2 hours a day and like and then I went to waiting tables and I was like, this is for the birds. Yeah, it is for the birds. It is for the birds. But I learned so much about myself outside of the circus. And I was a bit bitter with I don't want to get into like the details of like the circus drama, but I was like a bit bitter. And I was just like, all I know at this point as a young adult is working in the circus and being on those huge like 39 city tours and like just constantly not being home, maybe being home for two weeks a year. But it wasn't all bad. Like the next contract I got that year was to go to Japan the following year. And that was a year-long contract. Nice.
So I ended up the following year I went to Universal Studios in Osaka, Japan.
Is that where you met Susan?
I met Susan Wojcicki in at Circus Center. Okay. And oh my God, when I met Susan Wojcicki, you guys, who's another African American aerialist, I was just like, yes! Oh my God. And she's on this swinging cerceau and she's singing and she's wearing a dress and she has all this crazy hair and she is unapologetically Susan.
She's beautiful.
All in it. I was just like, oh my God. I just was like eyeing her from across the room at Circus Center and I wanted to talk to her. And then finally I was like, I'll just talk to her about neck spins. I don't know why. So I was talking to her about neck spins and like just trying to like force myself on this woman because this was the only other like high level, like professional Black aerialist that I met in this whole time, besides my mentor, who I shouldn't leave out, Pamela Hernandez, who was one half of the duo Satin, who was the first Black aerial act on Ringling Brothers. They debuted the year I was born.
Wow.
But she had a fall and she had an accident, so she wasn't performing anymore when I started, but she became my mentor. So I did have a powerful, extraordinary woman of color in my corner. But Susan was just like, like me watching her, I just had such a girl crush. I was like, this is everything I want to be. Even though I had like my own career. And it was just like amazing when I saw her.
So it must have been so great, to be in Osaka. Mm-hmm. She was on that contract too, yes?
She was on that contract, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And that was when we were kind of forced to like be friends, because we were like working in the same company, in the same show, and then the show was like very Japanese. I'll leave it like that. We weren't doing much of what we trained our whole lives to do at that point.
I feel like Susan told me the story where you guys were like panthers or cats.
She was a leopard.
She was a leopard.
And I was a lion, excuse me. I was queen of the jungle.
Right. Naturally.
Susan was my cousin. And this is funny too, because we literally got cast because they wanted darker skinned people to play those characters. Nice. And so once we realized that, we were just like, rah! So that was an extraordinary experience. That was eye-opening too, because I was like that's when I was really exposed to like colorism and stuff like that.
Really?
Like as an artist, like I kind of knew like working for Universal Circus was one of my dreams.
Right.
And I had designs on going there after college, but that didn't happen. I ended up there. And then I didn't really plan for anything else.
I know that's a weird cut, but I really like it. I didn't really plan for anything else. Well, a lot more came to Veronica Blair. In next week's episode, we'll explore how her experiences with Universal in Osaka, on Africa, and other projects inspired her to question the history of African Americans and people of color in general in the circus in America. I think the key takeaway that I got from this episode was how much training Veronica got and how different her training was. And what do I mean by that? I mean that when we think of training, you think of going to the gym or the studio or whatever space you perform your daily routine in. But Veronica, when she was cast on Universal, got many other different types of training. She went down to Sarasota, Florida, and learned how to make an entrance, learned how to style, learned how to hold for applause, learned the importance of sparkle and an entrance dress. All of these pieces are very specific to the art form of circus. And I think it's a really wonderful testament to Veronica that she was put in a situation where she got to learn from circus greats like Lenormand Fox and Dolly Jacobs. Veronica and I talked a little bit about this phenomenon that we both kind of observe happens to some performers when they get their first contract. When you start working, you stop that daily routine in the gym or studio or whatever you want to call it, and a different type of training has to begin, which is what it feels like to fill a huge arena or stage or stadium with your presence, especially if you're a soloist or have an act like Veronica did with a partner. And I'm still not sure that this kind of energy, this kind of performative quality can be practiced. My interview with Laura Stokes, we kind of touched on this a little bit. Can you change your energetic projections? Can you change your state or what you're putting out to your audience? Can you practice that in a gym? And I'm not sure. And I wish that I had asked Veronica that question. Maybe I will when I see her, because I am right now in San Francisco, California. I'm having a blast reuniting with a bunch of old friends, including Veronica. I am getting to tour the Patreon studios this week, which should be really exciting. And I'm giving classes at San Francisco Pole and Dance. So if you're in the Bay Area and you want to take a lesson with me, you can hit me up probably easiest on Instagram, because I'm on it all the time, at _artist_athlete. My website is www.theartistathlete.com. And to contribute to the Artist Athletes podcast's ongoing mission to provide education and inspiration of circus arts through interviews with professionals in the field, go to patreon.com/theartistathlete. You can find Veronica Blair on Instagram at Veronica_Blair_aerialist. She has links to some of her beautiful performances on her Instagram. So definitely check that out, study up, get ready for next week, where we have part 2 of my interview with Veronica. See you then, guys.